your behalf, just let us know. And as it says here, please let us know who you are in the chat, where you're coming from, and in terms of your weather as well. We've all had fantastic weather this past week. Let us know if you've had some great weather with you, or if it's if you've got the storms just yet. I don't know if there's anything I've missed there, Jo.
No, I think you've covered everything, Danielle. I guess it's just that quite a lot of today is going to be smaller group discussions in the breakout rooms, and when you are in the digital breakout rooms, it would be better if you can put your cameras and mics on, because it just helps you to collaborate and get to know each other. But when we're all back in this big group session, as Danielle says, if you can keep your cameras off, it helps with bandwidth. But I think without further ado, we should probably hand over to Patrick, who can introduce himself, I think, and I know has got a packed session for you. So welcome back, everyone. And here is Patrick Marshall, a lecturer from Sheffield Hallam University, who is our facilitator today.
Thank you, Jo. Thank you, Danielle, and thank you, Emma. Welcome, everybody. It's a real pleasure to be here, and to an honour to have been asked. So I work at Sheffield Hallam, and if we just move the slide on, please, Emma, thank you. If you want to read about me, it's on there. I'm on the internet. It's just like all those things. But the things I want to sort of really draw out for you is that for me, leadership is about doing. The theory's great, theories are wonderful, but it's very much about practice, and that's kind of where my interest in leadership has come from. I was a practicing head teacher for 10 years in a secondary school in Hertfordshire, and that's where leadership came, and that's when I did my doctorate. Leadership is a tough thing, and it can sometimes feel like it's moving around on you, and that's normal. But although it's difficult, and although you sort of think, why am I doing this? It must be an easier life. Let me just go back to clinical work and just do ordinary stuff. But I will say to you that when you do grasp that leadership thistle, the rewards are enormous, because you can make it better for your colleagues, you can make it better absolutely for your patients, and you can actually improve the system as a whole. And I think never underestimate that, that act of leadership that you can do as individuals, particularly from your sort of advanced practice and your physician's associate roles, is really significant and important, and it's almost kind of unknown at the moment. So don't underestimate how important your role is as it begins to develop. And part of being at the vanguard of things, being at the front edge of things, is that you get to define it. You get to create the space that is called leadership for advanced clinical practitioners and for physicians associates. The most important thing I think about leadership is about your self-awareness. And your self-awareness is really important. It's about understanding and noticing all the things that you bring and seeing everything that happens to you as data. So, you have a good day, and that good day will be full of data points, and you've got to see them as all data points, as opposed to kind of, it was all down to me. It might be, but it's all data. Similarly, a bad day is all data. There's no difference between a good and a bad day. It's just data. And if you think of it that way, your anger, your reactions, your irritations, all of those things, the good and the bad, if you see them as being part of that kind of enormous data set you get, then you will actually be able to hold that, as I say here, keep it in balance and hold it together, and ultimately be able to sort of come back tomorrow, because that's the key thing. Right, Danielle, Emma, if you could just move on, please. Okay, there are loads of ways of looking at leadership, and I know you looked at with Danielle at that in a previous session. These are a couple of ones of looking at it. Is leadership on the right about you? Might be about you climbing up and your thing. If you look at the kind of leadership development literature, a lot of it talks about that individual and talent management and climbing up and making your way and so on. Perfectly reasonable, but it can also be about helping others. And there's a whole chunk of literature and a whole chunk of research around coaching and mentoring and genuinely helping other people and helping the people around you become better at what it is they do. And that's also what leadership is. And hopefully at the end, I'll give you a chance to have a think about some role models who are unusual, that you can think, well, you know, in what kind of leader do I want to be, that I am becoming, that I have already been, and where do I want to go with it? Next slide, please. There are loads of these on the internet, as I'm sure you've all found, but I do think there's something about this which is really important. We often have a sense of leadership which is very much kind of the actual theory is the great man theory, and it's very deliberately called the great man theory because in the early 20th century that's exactly where it came from. There was the idea that leaders are born and they're just natural, they're just who they are. Please don't underestimate how powerful that still is with people, you know, voters and other people who kind of see leadership as being a thing that some people can do because they're naturally good at it, as opposed to other people who aren't. But I have found in my experience that the very best leaders are ones who are almost invisible. They almost get the job done for other people, but actually they're doing loads of things behind the scenes. So, you know, I would offer that to you as a way of being comforted by the fact that you might think, oh, I'm not a natural leader, or I don't really have a natural leadership style, or I don't do leadership. Actually, you might well do, because if you're allowing other people to do it, then you probably are. Okay, and the next slide, please. All right, so this is a couple of just little bits and pieces which you can go to afterwards, but it is elusive, you know that, but there are some things that are common about definition. So there's something about going somewhere, you are trying to do something. You talked last week about vision, and you talked last week about influencing, and there is something about holding those very simple things. There's a link there to a whole host of different definitions with some literature which you can go to if you want to. If we could move the next slide on, please, Emma. But the key thing is this, all right? Leaders require followers. You know, if people aren't following you, you're not leading anything. And leaders influence those people. They influence the people they follow, and there's a responsibility and a relationship and all that around that. And there is something that you're doing together to do something important. And obviously in health and social care, that's fairly obvious, but don't underestimate that, you know, it is about that relationship between the people who are following you in whatever way, and that could be team members, that could be peers, that could be subordinates, that could be superordinates. But you're going somewhere, you're doing something together. That's the key thing. And the next slide, which I think gets us to Covey. Right, you talked about influence last week, and I just want to show you this particular slide because I think it's a very interesting one. This is Stephen Covey, who's the 7 Habits of Effective People man, and he talks about his circles of influence and circles of concern. And one of the problems of leadership is often that it can crowd in on you. You can become overwhelmed by all the problems and all the things. And what Covey talks about is how you can move out of that sort of constrained centre, that place, that circle on the left, and push towards the things that you can control and the things you can influence. And that actually allows you to be much more proactive, but also, I think, to be sustained both in your own skin and your own self, but also in terms of how you're working professionally. So, you know, not just who do you influence, but how do you use influence in your own professional practice to basically make that influence as big as possible. So you don't feel, if you feel yourself getting crowded in, I can't do, it's impossible, it's not, I know, why do people keep giving me these things? Why have I got all these monkeys on my back? It's a metaphor for the idea of other people give you a problem and they give you their monkey, you put it on and you carry all their monkeys on your back. That metaphor can be flipped. That's what Covey's suggesting. And you actually push that away and you say, no, what is it that I can do? What are the areas where I can have influence, and I do have influence, that can be pushed out? The larger that circle, the more sustained your leadership, and actually the happier you're likely to be. So, you know, I offer it to you as a model of a way of thinking. And then I think we go into a breakout room, which is the next slide. So if you've got a camera, a smartphone, just take a photograph of that. So it's that kind of talk, just ever so quickly talk to yourself. You've only got 10 minutes. what's your circle of concern? What's crowding in on you at the moment? What can you influence? Yeah, and how might you make your circle of influence bigger than your circle of concern? Actually pushing that out. And if one of you from your group could come back and just, you know, share that with us, we'll take a 10-minute sort of break. So please pop into your breakout rooms. Emma's going to do that for me now. So let's just get a little bit of feedback. If the person from feedback sort of just from their group wants to just sort of say anything that they want to say about anything, just gives it a chance to sort of get a flavour of what was going on in your breakout rooms.
So if someone wants to be brave and go first, if you perhaps use the hands up function to just identify yourself or pop a camera on. Elizabeth Dunn. Let's
Hi.
Back from your group.
Hi. So my situation at the moment is over the last 6 weeks, I've had 3 new members of staff start, of which I am the team leader of that. And for a long time, it's been just me. So basically, overnight, I've gone from having a very small circle of concern, which was myself and the team that I was part of, to now suddenly having a large circle of concern with trying to integrate these new team members so that we gel together well as a team. And I'm hoping that my sort of my big circle is going to decrease, and that my bigger outer circle of influence is going to increase as they all settle in and as we all gel together as a team. And being kind of a leader for that is quite challenging at times, but I feel I'm rising to the challenge, and it's going okay. But I am having to draw on all my skills of diplomacy and tact at times.
Really interesting. Thank you, Elizabeth. Yeah, I can see that. That's very, you know, a very common thing, isn't it? You know, new role, new managerial role. You have a brand new team. Yeah, it's hard, you know, and hopefully some of the things I might talk about a bit later on might not address it, but they might sort of, you know, sort of speak to that kind of concern. But yeah, just good luck.
Yeah, thank you.
Anyone else?
I didn't see whose hand up went first out of Wendy and Maggie. Wendy, I think you popped your hand up before, so should we go with you next?
Hello. There. Hi, Patrick.
Hi, Wendy.
The circle of concern is around conflict from an organisational goal versus the staff vision. So I'm an ACP in a mental health service. I'm the first ACP in the trust, and the vision is to integrate physical and mental health with a body of evidence and a body of literature that supports that. The organisation's really clear about the direction, the staff less so. So historically, staff have had an expectation that intervention is pushed back to primary care and to GPs and to acute hospital trusts. And now I'm in this new post which nobody knows anything about, or there's a high expectation of I do everything from phlebotomy to a respiratory exam. And staff who've been tokenistically doing those physical health interventions are resistive to change, as well as those stakeholders that have never had anything to do with integration of physical and mental health before. So whilst the organisation is really clear about the goal, and I've got the knowledge and skills to be able to promote that, my actual population of people who I wish to influence for the benefit of service users, carers and families is resistant to doing that change.
That's a corker.
It's a cracker, isn't it?
And I think it speaks exactly to what the problem with ACPs are, because in a sense you're entering into a brand new space that nobody really understands, and everybody kind of is, because in a weird kind of way, if you think about it on a systems level, you're pushing out people from the space that they would otherwise have occupied, which in your case was we do what we do.
Yeah.
And that's really threatening. And it's really hard. And I think, you know, my own kind of experience of that is it's just going to take enormous amounts of time and the energy from you to build up the trust where people can, you know, so we'll talk about role modeling. I think role modeling is really important for leaders, you know, particularly ACPs and particularly PAs, because you're so exposed. People are going to be looking at you and they're going to be ignoring you, but they're going to, whatever, you're important because you're there. You know, you're not just a theory, you're present. And I think that's, you know, it's tough. And I think there's going to be a real battle. And I just go back to my point about the vanguard. You know, you are the first pushes of these. And I think it's just always tough when you're the first one going through. But very, very best of luck. And if there's anything, you know, I or anyone else can do, I'm sure, just ask, because I think it's going to be outside your organisation where you're going to get the support, because you're probably not going to get it from the team. Normally we get it from our team members, don't we? You can't do that because your team members don't understand what it is you're doing, and they don't want you to do it anyway.
Yeah.
Really hard. Yeah. And I guess there will be a lot of people in the room who are having similar, not exactly the same, but very similar issues where their role is almost confronting systems that are in operation, have been in operation for many years.
Oh, well, thanks for listening. Just really important to self-care.
Yes.
As well.
Oh,
to return my own mental and physical well-being is about that self-care, to retain my resilience against all this bombardment of negativity and conflict. It's just about me keeping myself safe, and I would advocate that for anybody else.
And that's the bit of the influence you can do, because ultimately what Covey talks about is the bits that are in your control, and the bit in this case that you can control is your ability to come back tomorrow.
Yeah.
So, and that might mean you take your holidays. You know, you do leave your phone and your email alone. And again, I'm talking not just to Wendy, I'm talking to lots of you, because it's so important. We can all get sucked into the idea of I'm so crucial, I need to keep doing. You don't. And if you keep doing that thing, you'll end up resenting it, and more importantly, you'll end up being ill.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
We've got Maggie next.
Hi, Maggie.
Hi, Patrick. Hi. We discussed about a clarification of job roles at the moment. I just brought my experience of moving into primary care as a primary care matron about 4 years ago. We only had one practice there. Now it's just increased to 9 practices. My job description has just gone broad and broad. And I think some of the ACPs are finding that as well. There's no distinction really, and sometimes we get pulled up and pulled down into corporate issues, and then pulled down into clinical issues as well, to actually, you know, if we've got shortage in workforce, we have to fulfill it. So it's just really escalating our concerns above, you know, when there are issues, and maintaining our well-being. For me, I tend to do a lot of coaching. Yes. I've got people that can, you know, that coach, and that's my network of people that keeps my well-being on the straight and narrow, really. So yeah. No,
I absolutely. I can't recommend strongly enough. If you haven't got a coach, get a coach. There are thousands of people in training to be coaches who will give it to you for free, let alone experienced coaches for whom, yes, you need to pay. Sometimes your organisation will pay. Sometimes, you know, it's important, you know, it's so important you do it anyway. And if you've never experienced coaching, talk to somebody that has, because I think that's another way of, as you say, the influence you can bring to bear. Yeah. So again, good luck, Maggie. And I suspect that slide on the screen means I've got to move on, because we've spent too much time on that. Lovely. Thank you, Maggie. And thank you to all the people that also wanted to share, but we didn't really have time for. But we are on a fairly tight thing. Right. So this next section is about leadership development. So one of the things that, you know, you're here for is kind of, well, how do you get better? How do you improve your skills? So this is Benison Nanas, famous Harvard academics, who kind of talked about the kind of very practical end of having spoken to lots of leaders in all sorts of different sectors. So what is it that's important? Well, first of all, it's really difficult. You know, the acknowledging shared uncertainty is the fact that no one really knows. I mean, if you think about all of your concerns, they're likely to be in this idea of we're running an uncertain world, we've got COVID, we've got, you know, massive pressures on beds, we've got, you know, whatever it is, you know, an aging population, whatever the issue is, it's essentially, it's shared. But the important thing is acknowledging it and knowing that that's about shared. When things go wrong, and they will go wrong, it's about embracing the wrong, which sounds completely counterintuitive, but it's important. And I know it's very hard in health and social care because the blame culture is really, really dominant. And we know that. But actually, the more you can go, we got that wrong, we could have done that better, the more chance there is of actually addressing patient needs in a stronger way. There is something about looking forward. So, you know, accountable care partnerships, integrated care systems, they're all part of where the NHS is going, and has been going because it needs to go that way. And there's all sorts of futures that you might need to play out, but it is about kind of trying to look forward rather than looking backward to, well, we did this 4 years ago, we may have done, but actually always orientating yourself towards the future will help you actually move forward. And I think the interpersonality, it was that first concern where you talked about, you know, a brand new team. It is about that sense of the more skills we have between ourselves as people, the more we can listen, the more we can empathise, the more we can you know, begin to sort of see patterns in things and share that back in a sort of an authentic way, the better and more appropriate our responses, both as leaders but also as people and as team members. That's really important. And again, come back to self-knowledge. The more self-aware you are, the better. Emma, if we could just move on, please. So there are things, you know, one of the things that I was asked to do is kind of, how do you evidence your leadership learning? You know, where do you go for this? How can you not just get better at things, but how do you know you've got better at things? Well, the first sort of, and this list comes from Gary Yuckel's work, and I think he's edition 9 is leadership in organisations now, which is 2020, but it's been going since about 2005. But ultimately, this is the list he comes up with, and he's got multi-source feedback, development assessment centres, development assignments, job rotation, action learning, mentoring, executive coaching, and personal growth. Now, all of those systems that Yuckel describes, again, come from people saying, how do I know as a manager, how do I know as a leader that my staff are doing? How do I look at my own development and so on? But I would very strongly, if you haven't used it or don't know about it, the NHS's healthcare leadership model, which is what HCLM stands for, is really powerful. It's not just powerful as a 360 model. It's powerful as a toolkit that you can use when looking at some of the things that the NHS say leadership is about. And those colleagues in social care, it's really good and it works very well for social care, and it is kind of aligned to the social care version, because there is I think it's a leadership qualities framework which exists in social care. But you know, they haven't got a 360. This one has, and I think you can do the 360s. £48 I think it costs to get a 360 for that. Again, you know, you can use that model as a way of developing your actual skills. The other thing, of course, is action learning. You can do, you know, courses and the like, and that's fine. But don't underestimate that doing quality improvement and service improvement can actually really help you understand what's going on. The audit process that you often go through to work out what's going on can be very powerful. Mentoring is crucial. That can be internal and can be external, but again, that sense of empathy for others, seeing where they are, helping them along. We all need that. You know, we all need that. If you can get an executive coach, brilliant. Sometimes organisations will pay for them. Most of your very senior leaders will have them anyway. And there are other challenge programs. You know, people do the kind of, you know, they put people on a moor and they ask you to sort of see how far you can go, or, you know, sort of really putting sort of real pressure on. But let's have a look at the model. So the next slide, please, Emma. this is the model. It has 9 domains, and these domains have been very carefully generated from a series of focus groups from a whole host of stakeholders, and I was lucky enough to be in that back in 2013. But it's also generated from the NHS Constitution, so you can see various aspects of this, and if you look at this in detail, it will give you some characteristics of behaviour. If you are behaving in a way that inspires shared purpose, these are the kinds of things we would expect to see. So do look at this in some detail. I'd love to spend, you know, I could spend hours, days indeed, entire modules looking at this. We haven't got time, but it's a very powerful tool, and you can look at it online when you maybe in a breakout room if you want to sort of go, well, how do I do this? You know, that's absolutely fine. So if we can move on, please, and go to the next breakout room. So this is breakout room 2. So I'm going to put you back in your breakout rooms. Again, you might need to take a photograph just to go, what are we doing? What I want you to look at now and talk about is, so how do you do it then? How are you, as an individual ACP or physician's associate, how are you going to develop your leadership at this moment? You know, what are you thinking? And what, from some of the things I've talked about, what might be, what resonate most strongly to you? And again, if we just share, you know, one thing and maybe, you know, whatever. And I think because we're going to run out of time a little bit, one of the things I want you to do in your breakout room is to make sure, and I think we probably got enough time, because if we try to get this back at 11:15, if you need to take a break, go to the loo, get some water because it's really hot, feel free to do that in this session. And what we're going to do with our feedback in breakout rooms, we might just have a very, very short kind of bit, but also I think there's a Jamboard which Emma will help me with as where that goes, and she'll send you the link where you could maybe put some of your suggestions, because I think that could be very useful for us to look at all together, so you can actually say, well, these are some of the things that I'm thinking we could do.
While Patrick's just rejoining us, if you want to use the hands up function again from your breakout rooms just to share, it'd be really good to hear the highlights of what you've been talking about in your groups. So if you can use the hands up function just so we can see who doesn't mind. Emma, can you just help Patrick? Are you all right just to try and help Patrick rejoin? I think he's just having a few tech problems. In the meantime, maybe we could have some feedback from the groups. So if anyone's feeling brave and doesn't mind popping their camera on again, it was lovely to hear from some of you last time. If you just pop your hands up, I know who's going to be giving the feedback. Is there anybody who's going to be brave and give us some feedback from what you were talking about in your breakout rooms? Wendy, thank you. Would you like to go first? Do feel free to pop your camera on and talk to us again. Hello again. I think you're still on mute, Wendy. There
Sorry,
we are.
I hate it when that happens.
It's all right, easily done.
So as a group, I think that we identified that actually sometimes changing the way that we behave as potential leaders can kind of mitigate those potentially conflicting situations with staff who are resistant to change. And one of the group members was talking about an autocratic style of her kind of manager or main influencer, and that they'd felt that they were kind of passive aggressive or pessimistic in their interactions, and actually that person's personality isn't like that. They have really positive characteristics and behaviours and are a really good nurse and are a really good role model. So kind of reframing that to not match the behaviour of the person that's being negative, but almost to flip it, to be able to shine some sunshine on a situation and role model how you want the situation to be, could be a way of developing a leadership characteristic that's more positive. I think, I mean, shout me down, group, if that's if that wasn't reflected accurately.
No.
And you know, pick your fights, basically.
Yeah, that's a really, really important point, isn't it, about picking your battles. Did you identify or talk about anything specific that could help you with that? So you've talked about how, you know, thinking about different leadership styles and approaches, perhaps how you communicate and influence people. Did you think about any tools or approaches in particular that might help with that?
You know, I think the coaching is always a good one, having a shared vision and being with like-minded others.
Yeah.
So it's hard being a single person in a group that's really negative, but you only need one other person to go, yes, you're right.
Yes.
I think that's great.
Yeah.
And that then influences really positively. So I think coaching, collaboration, empathy, shared vision, all those kind of characteristics and behaviours that are positive.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point about recruiting allies. You know, finding someone else so that you're not the lone voice in the wilderness. Welcome back, Patrick. Sorted out your tech problems. So we've just had some feedback from Wendy and their group about, you know, thinking about different leadership styles and how different styles might work differently to help bring others on board. And as you heard there at the end, just that really important point of finding someone else to sell your message for you and with you can really help to get that group on board.
Really important. Actually, I could hear you. I just couldn't see you. It was a really strange thing. You know, it looked like my camera and stuff was on. It was a blank screen, but I could hear everyone. Very strange. Anyway, thank you for that, and thank you for people's contribution. If you want to put your stuff on the Jamboard, that'd be really helpful, I think, particularly in terms of the things that you might want to do or could do, or ideas for things. In my group, we were talking about the healthcare leadership model 360 tool, which, you know, you might want to talk to your you know, line managers about doing and using. I found very useful, and, you know, if anyone wants someone outside their organisation, I'm happy to be your facilitator. It doesn't cost anything for me to do that for you, but I'm very happy. You know, you can find me you know, I mean, Beverley, East Yorkshire is my sort of area. Right, okay, so if we could move on, please, Emma, to the next slide. Right, so this is controversial, but I'm going to hold to it. Role models. One of the things I think is really important that you can do, and you are doing as both ACPs and PAs, is you are being role models. And I think the reason why I've chosen to look at Boris Johnson is because there are some things we have to acknowledge about leadership that is true, and Boris Johnson exemplifies it. The Tom McTague quote comes from this edition of The Atlantic, which is an American publication, and he followed him round during the 2019 election campaign. And, you know, I'll read it. He's lively and engaged, superficially dishevelled, but in fact focused and watchful. He's scruffy, impulsive, exuberant. He's the first British Prime Minister I've seen who genuinely appears to have a good time. His conversations with members of the public are peppered with "that's amazing," "you're joking," and "wonderful," and "fantastic, fantastic." The point I'm making here is that we shouldn't underestimate the need to connect to people, and those connections can be done in ways which, you know, one individual might not always take to, but other people will. So don't be sort of seduced by there is only one way of doing it. There are lots of ways of doing it, and actually Boris Johnson does it his way. And, you know, if we were to look at the last two elections, you know, he can be quite good at doing stuff like that. So one of the aspects, and the reason why I put him there as a role model, is actually that ability to connect with your colleagues, that ability to connect with your patients, interestingly, but particularly your colleagues, and, you know, the system at wide, particularly in the ACP and PA world, which is such an emergent space, is vital. You have to be able to get people to hear you, you have to be able to get people to see you, and you have to get people to be able to sort of buy in to what you're selling. I mean, we had that lovely, you know, when Wendy was talking about some of the problems she was having, you can see that those challenges. And I offer him as one role model. To balance that out, because it's all about balance in the world of academia these days, could we have the next slide, please? Here is another role model. This is Jacinda Ardern, who's the Prime Minister of New Zealand, and like Boris Johnson, she also can win landslide elections and does very well at the polls, but she's a very different character. And this is one of her many quotes. I refuse to believe that you cannot be both compassionate and strong. Now, you know, all politicians can be criticised by people who don't happen to agree with that politician's stance, but they also all have that ability to, you know, speak to people because they need to get elected. You know, that's what the democratic process does. And what Ardern does is that whole thing around empathy and compassion and the kind of going into places which you would not normally expect leaders to do. And I suspect that for many of us, and certainly me included, there is a real kind of draw to that, because you think, well, that sounds very good. And one of the most famous bits that she did was during the there was a bombing in a mosque in Christchurch, I think it was, in New Zealand, and one of the acts of her going to, you know, people go to the disaster areas, that's what politicians do, and she, you know, covered her head and, you know, and wore a hijab to go and talk to those people, and people respond very, very positively to her. And I contrast or compare the way she connects with people and the way Boris Johnson connects with people, but in a sense that role modelling is about connection, and both share that. And again, regardless of anyone's politics, it's to do with that ability to connect. So I offer it to you as a really strong way forward. And if we could sort of look at the third breakout room, really, which are the scenarios. Now, I'm gonna. So these are scenarios, and I want you to pick maybe take a photograph of all of them and pick one to look at. You won't have a chance to look at all of them. And well, I'm going to give you sort of 10 minutes to have a think. And again, if you need to go for a break, please go for a break. Just have, yes, if we look at the scenario one, and the, oh, I should make that a bit bigger, but never mind. Right, so you could put probably PA in this as well, to be fair. You are a newly appointed ACP with a significant clinical and managerial experience. Your new line manager doesn't understand your role and is unsupportive of your appointment, so they didn't really want you. You find yourself ignored, underutilised by the team, which is causing you significant frustration. This comes to a head when you are undermined in front of a patient and your professional judgment is contradicted by a junior doctor who's also part of your MDT. How do you use your leadership skills to address this issue and improve the patient experience in your service? Now, I think you can in this one put ACP in there. And if you've got to pick one, you might want to take a photograph of it. Pick this one, because I think it's a one that sort of has a real resonance. But I'll also talk you through the other scenarios that may come across, and I've spoken to ACPs and PAs about this. So if we look at scenario 2, please, Emma. Scenario 2, you are a newly appointed PA with some clinical experience. Your new team is understaffed and your line manager is off work with stress. I'm sure none of you have any of those experiences. You find yourself in a clinical situation which is beyond what you feel confident in resolving. You have to call an experienced doctor clinician to help you, and she or he undermines your authority in front of your patient. So quite similar to the last one. How do you use your leadership skills to address this issue and improve the patient experience? And by leadership skills, think about all the things you know. Think about all the things you kind of intuitively and instinctually know, as well as things that you may have come across in terms of other leadership courses or whatever. What would you do? How would you go about dealing with this? And then look at the third one, please, Emma. And scenario 3 is you have been in your ACP or PA post for over 6 years. You've done well, and your MDT colleagues have respect for your skills and abilities. And this may represent some of you as well. You are now thinking. You are thinking now about new leadership opportunities and have an annual review meeting with your line manager coming up. What are you going to do about it? How do you use your leadership skills too? So thinking about that, let's take this, put you back into breakout rooms. We will take the feedback, as part of a Q&A thing. But I'm going to put you. Emma's going to put you in breakout rooms. Have a think about any one of those, just do one of those scenarios.
Over to you.
Brilliant. I think we can probably stop sharing the PowerPoint now, Emma, if you want to just take us back to a big space. So thank you ever so much for doing that, and hopefully you found that useful. What we will do now in the next sort of 15 minutes is take a whole host of feedback, really. So feedback on the scenarios, absolutely. Let's do that. Any, which people put your hand up or turn your camera on, and we can listen and have a chat. But also, I think general questions in about this, about leadership development for an ACP or a PA. So just to talk to us, ask a question, make a comment. Feel free. We've got from now till 12 o'clock, which is about 16 minutes I make by my watch. So it's over to you, really. And we Joe and Emma and Danielle will try to answer your questions.
So anyone feeling brave and want to pop their hand up and talk to us? It's been lovely to hear from some of you so far. We really do want your feedback from the groups. Is there a group we've not heard from yet? Somebody, you're all potential leaders. I don't believe that you're all shy. So can somebody pop a hand up and give us a little bit of feedback from your groups? That would be lovely. We do want to hear from you. I know we keep telling you to turn your cameras off, but now we're asking you to be brave and turn them on. Are there any hands going up? Were there any of the scenarios that you thought particularly resonated with your role, perhaps? Were there scenarios that you thought, yep, I've been there, that happened to me? Jamie, you're up.
Hi, I'm not putting my camera on just
that's
because,
all right.
It's a day off and all that.
Of course, that's fine. Yeah, lovely to hear from you.
I'm looking a bit rough. I was from group 2, and we were we talked about the first 2 scenarios really, because it was a similar kind of idea, wasn't it? That undermining in front of a patient, and we talked about how important self-awareness was in tackling this issue. I personally get really angry and know from experience it's not good to tackle something straight away because it doesn't really resolve very well. So over the years I've learned to go away, reflect, think about it, and then maybe ask for a meeting with a colleague if I think it's going to be a conflict type scenario. If I feel safe, then I would probably just try and have an informal chat with that person, and we kind of all felt the same about that. Try to reflect and turn it into a positive, maybe say, oh, that was interesting, that scenario we had with that patient that day. Can you explain to me why you came up with your conclusion? This is why I thought like I did. And then you can have a discussion and maybe an educational benefit from a potential conflict situation.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more, Jamie. I think one of the things about that, conflict is a fascinating kind of concept, isn't it? Because we all deal with conflict in a default way. You can just give in, you can just take over, but ultimately the most productive responses to conflict is those bits in the middle where you kind of win people around and you end up collaborating around it. You can compromise, but I think there's actually a more a collaboration phase, which is actually the most productive way, because you don't feel you've not had your say, but neither does the other person feel they've been somehow not listened to. But it's hard doing that, and it's about trust and relationships, isn't it? And I think it's easy when you're in post for a while because people see what you do and they begin to respond, but it's tough. And I think it's the system itself is not very good at understanding these new roles, yours and others, because I think you won't be the only new roles that the system needs to create.
Emma.
We have a comment from Wendy saying that their group talked about the impact of criticism being undermined by others and the emotional response that we have as human beings. Sort of face-to-face discussion, when you did or said that, I felt this, which I thought was quite a good point, because it's very natural to do that. And we've also got Kerry commenting saying that I am looking at doing a SIP, looking at role clarity and also giving the patients more information about the different roles within the practice. Patients want advice from GPs more than us as they do not understand the role, and this gives GPs the opportunity to undermine us. I want to educate the patients and staff about the ACP role to ensure they feel more confident in our care, especially elderly patients do not like the ACP role.
Yeah, I think I was talking in my group. Bree was talking about this scenario, and my comment to her was that in many ways it's ACPs themselves sometimes have got to promote. So, you know, case studying, you know, a patient that you've worked with really strong, you know, really well, and the patient have loved actually after they, you know, got over why are you there, why aren't you a doctor, and all that stuff, and then they've actually had a very productive and useful consultation with you. It's about getting that patient to sort of share that with other patients. It's a really, you know, it's odd, but that promotional role has probably got to be done by all of you, because the system itself won't understand enough about you to be able to do it for, you know, saying the surgery needs to do it, or the hospital needs to do it, or the trust. I suspect they kind of don't know how, but you do. And I think it's about patients often, isn't it? Rather than, it can be colleagues. Colleagues are easier to talk to, but I think patients are the ones that can be the most troublesome's the wrong word, but you know what I mean? Because if you get that trust of your patients, then they'll follow you all over the place. They'll love you for it, you know. And I think it is about that, you know, demonstrating you can do it, and using those examples in very positive ways for them to tell other patients how useful and productive that was.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting, the common, as so often when we have these discussions, there's that common theme of communication or communication difficulties that's coming up, and you know, and that emotional response that we get. I thought that the comment, you know, that comment's really insightful, and I think there's something really important about addressing that emotional response, both and recognizing it in ourselves, but also sometimes that can also be the key to unpicking those situations with your colleagues as well, that actually if they are behaving in a particular way or communicating in a particular way that we might find difficult or challenging, there's something about maybe unpicking where they're coming from. And most people are just trying to do the best job they can for their patients, aren't they? So if they're coming from a different point of view, or we feel like we're on different pages, what's behind that? And perhaps that can sometimes be the key to those conversations, is trying to unpick where they're coming from and what it is that they're feeling so passionate about, and yeah, it can sort of have that two-way conversation. I'm conscious that Tracy, our speaker from last week, is on the line, and I don't know, Tracy, I also am conscious of putting you on the spot, but I don't know whether there was anything you wanted to reflect, Tracy, about you know, the comments that are coming in and perhaps those scenarios.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, what I did want to say, I was just about to put my hand up. You got me. That the group I was in had some other interesting ideas that I thought it might be quite nice to throw into the mix. One of which was around picking your battles and actually being strategic as a leader, and choosing when and where to address issues. And acknowledging absolutely that in the moment was sometimes not the best place, particularly if you were, as the scenario suggested, with a patient. So about picking your battles, being strategic in that respect, choosing when and where, and then just as our time was up, there were a couple of other things that came up. One about having experience and really knowing the people in your team as individuals can very much help. And I think what was being said was that different people, you know, need responding to in different ways. So that was another thing that came up. And then I thought another really interesting point was that sometimes referring up can be appropriate. You know, there's a broad spectrum of behaviours that people might face, and that sometimes referring up can be appropriate, but equally to remember that you're not alone, you know, that we're not all in isolation, and that we do have colleagues, and that is really, really important, and can get us through sometimes, and also can help us look at things from different perspectives.
Yes,
that was my little group in a nutshell, who are busy bees despite the internet challenges.
Thank you. And I can see, Neve in the chat is just saying how there's lots of different layers to this, isn't there? That we have our circle of colleagues who we work with all the time, and so we're busy, educating them about the role. But then, as clinicians, we're often then suddenly thrown into work with people we don't normally work with. So Neve's mentioned, on call, and that it's so complex, isn't it, that there isn't really a one answer to this. But the root is definitely there, just in those communication skills, isn't it? And I guess the real question for today is, it's those development. So how do we evidence and develop those skills? And I would argue that a lot of you've probably got them already and are using them every day. And it's lovely to hear you coming and sharing those experiences with each other. Patrick, I don't know if there was anything else you wanted to pick up on from what Tracy was saying, or of the comments in the chat.
Just Tracy, nice to meet you, and I hope I didn't sort of completely contradict what you did last week. I try not to. But what I would say is I think self-awareness is really key. That sense, and I think the other thing I'd say is be the leader you are. Role models are important, but actually you are. You've not got to these roles without experience and training and energy and motivation, all sorts of really important things. And so being authentically you is really, really important. And then those other skills you might learn how to bite your tongue, suffer fools, whatever, they're just things you add on. But the core you, the values you hold, are crucial and need to be just hold to that, because that will keep you safe and it will keep you able to come back, because I think the thing that destroys people is when their very essence is attacked, or they find themselves, they've drifted from their core, who they really are, and actually that pressure is just too much to bear. So just stay true to yourself. And if you're not sure, it sounds weird, but checking in with the people that love you and know you is how you know that you're still staying. We can all drift off and go, particularly the workaholics among you, that will end up in a really strange place working really, really long hours, and actually your partner or the people that love you or your children will have been going, do you know, you're never here. And you need to hear that, which is the point of stop doing that, because it's actually killing you and destroying things that are really important to you. So, it's not easy, but as I say, when it works, it's brilliant, because you change people's lives.
I think that says it all, really. I don't think we can follow that. So yeah, be yourself, be you, because you are all brilliant.
Yeah, and things that one I'm sure Joe's going to say this, but there are keep talking to each other. You have more to teach each other than anybody outside, however skilled or knowledgeable or however many letters after their name they have. It is about that, because they do the same role as you do, and they experience similar things to you. So it is that's important. Sorry, Joe, I'll shut up now.
No, please don't, Patrick. I mean, really, all I wanted to say was thank you for today, Patrick. It's really, really do appreciate your running this session for us. It has been really insightful. It's been lovely to see the discussions going on in the groups, and it's been brilliant to have you with us. And thanks again, Tracy, both for last week and for joining us today again to sort of see it through. We really appreciate that, and it's been brilliant. And it was lovely to get some really positive feedback from last week's session. And I look forward to hearing from you all about today as well. So huge thanks from us at the Leadership Academy. Danielle, I don't know if there's anything you'd like to say before we finish.
I just want to echo your thoughts really, Jo, and thank the speakers very much. I mean, I think we could have talked all day about these issues, and it's a shame it was just such a short session, but I suppose we had to balance the time of people's clinical time, but it was really great, really insightful, and as Jo said, that feedback's really crucial. I mean, us at the faculty, we really want to understand if this is something you want to continue learning about. Please let us know, and if you want us to deliver it in a different way, a different style, please again just put it in the feedback form so that we can really understand how we can support you, because we want to continue this leadership support going forward. And thank you so much for your time today.
Yes, thank you all. So we are at the end of today's session. I am not going to scuttle off anywhere quickly, so if anyone does want to hang around and pop a hand up and carry on talking to us, or pop some comments in the chat, we will be here for a few more minutes, and happy to stay if people want to continue the discussion. But I do know that you're all extremely busy people, and if you do need to get on with the rest of your day, then thank you for joining us. We hope you found it helpful. Please do fill in the survey. I'm sorry about that. I know you get loads of e-surveys, but as Danielle says, we really do need your feedback. And keep in touch with us. Keep talking to each other. Keep talking to us, and go have the best day that you can.